The question of how to interpret the Constitution and the powers it exerts has been a point of debate since the founding of the Republic. At times, Americans have argued for a strict interpretation of the Constitution, which means that only the powers that are explicitly identified in writing are powers held by the federal government. This interpretation is meant to limit federal power. The basis for this interpretation largely derives from the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, which states that the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states or to the people. At other times, a broad or loose construction of the Constitution has been promoted. This view suggests that all powers and roles of the federal government cannot possibly be written down, that to fulfill its obligations, there must be a variety of implied powers given to the various branches of government that also allows for the government to adapt to changing circumstances. Largely, this perspective relies on a different part of the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, which states that Congress has the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. In other words, Congress could make laws that helped them and other branches or offices of the federal government fulfill their responsibilities to the nation. Fans of the Hamilton musical are likely aware of the first and most famous fight involving strict versus loose interpretation of the Constitution. Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of the Treasury, was in favor of establishing a national bank, an act clearly not delineated in the language of the Constitution. Thomas Jefferson, the Secretary of State, was opposed to this measure for that very reason. So, if you're following along at home, Alexander Hamilton promoted a loose construction of the Constitution, and Jefferson favored a strict construction. You may know that Hamilton's argument won the day, and the first Bank of the United States was chartered in 1791. It is also worth noting that a dozen years later, when Thomas Jefferson was president, he himself acted with this loose construction in mind. There is no provision in the Constitution that identifies buying a territory, in this case the Louisiana Territory, from a foreign nation, that being France, as a power of the US government. But nor was Jefferson going to turn down the opportunity to double the size of the United States. The Louisiana Purchase is considered one of Jefferson's greatest legacies, and he was willing to bend his views of constitutional power to achieve it.